The road to the NBA Finals ends here, with star guards setting the tone. The Cavs eye another upset, while the Knicks carry the dreams of all of New York. The Eastern Conference Finals continue on ESPN and ABC.
Three, two, one. Welcome to another Britflix.com podcast. My name is Stuart Wright, and today's guest is psychotherapist Katie Evans. Welcome.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. I'm excited to chat.
Indeed, indeed. Now, like everyone else, you're going to be here to share 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life.
Yes, I am.
But before that, we're going to be discussing bringing psychoanalysis and horror together and why you like to bring these topics to people. Because not only are you a therapist who's a horror fan, you're going out doing talks about the subject. By the time this goes live, 2 of your seed talks, I think, will have taken place. The one in Nottingham entitled "The Psychology of Horror Movies," and then one you're doing in Soho, "Horror Movies, Sexuality and Power."
Yeah, the new one. So that's the launch of the new
Oh,
talk.
really?
So,
really?
Yeah, that's going to be a whole new exciting one. Yeah, and hopefully it will have gone well.
So tell me then, where bringing psychoanalysis and horror together, why do you like bringing those topics to people? I mean, do you mean in terms of just general conversation, or do you mean as a therapist you bring them together?
Both, really.
Okay.
I mean, before I trained to be a therapist, I went to uni and I looked at film at uni before then. So I have a lot of student debt. I've kind of looked at different roles in life. But I did film then, and then went off, did some gender and sexuality studies, and then decided that I wanted to be a therapist. Went back to wanting to be a therapist, actually. It was something I'd looked at from being quite young. And the things are so interconnected. They're so connected because really film needs to know our psychology to work well, to work on that kind of core level. So, the best horror movies tap into something really core to being a human. Beyond jump scares and blood and guts and splatter, it has to tap into something that's a really deeply embedded fear or pleasure or something about ourselves that we're unsure of or we don't want to bring out into the light. So to bring those things together, I just find fascinating on every level. So even in my therapy practice, when I'm seeing clients, I will use horror if they like it. I'm not going to force it on everyone. But, if people do like horror, we can talk about it in terms of their monsters and the shadows that they have and kind of understanding ourselves through what we're watching, through the monsters that we perceive to have about ourselves, that we relate to, that we see ourselves reflected in. So, yeah, kind of everywhere I bring this stuff together, really.
Now, the interesting. I interviewed the researcher Stephen Follows. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he did a report called the Horror Movie Report. And in the UK, statistically speaking, if you go to a cinema and watch a horror film, you are going to get an audience that is reflective of the demographic of the UK. Whereas if you go to any other genre, it will skew to a wealthier, more a wealthier demographic, whether that be. Whereas horror films are appealing to everybody across all demographics.
Absolutely. And when I do the talks, that's what I love, because there's so many different types of people that come to the talks to come and learn about horror movies and the psychology behind them. There is no one particular type of person that seems to have an interest. I think it's because we can all relate to having fears, to having the stuff about ourselves that we don't always want to look at, to feeling monstrous at times, or feeling that the world feels quite scary. I mean, it feels very scary at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think we can all, as much as horror looks like it's about like jump scares and blood and guts and stuff that people don't particularly always enjoy.
Yeah.
There is something about it that I think reflects humanity as a whole, and always has through the decades. That's why it's always changing and always moving.
Yeah, because like if I think about, say, a classic one like Don't Look Now, which I'm not even sure it would have even been released, sort of made a big idea that it was a horror film. It sort of became part of horror canon as it became a movie that became, part of history, as it were, versus like, it is atypically what we would expect now from a Neon or an A24, what people talk about with elevated genre, because it's about this thing. It's a lot of, I always get frustrated as a horror fan and talking to people who maybe aren't fans. It feels to me like heavy metal. Like nobody likes it, but it's also bloody popular. It's sort of this weird, it's weird. And everybody has this 100%. Idea of horror film as if it's just Iron Maiden and there's only Iron Maiden and that's it. And then they'll do that thing where they tell you, oh, I saw Babadook. And they go, oh, it's amazing. Yeah. And you go, oh, so you do like horror films then? Oh, right. I didn't realize.
100%. I think Get Out was a big one for that. Like, I think Get Out was a film that so many people related to. It's an incredible film. So good. And it's such a good psychological horror, but suddenly it felt okay to like horror movies if you liked Get Out. And The Substance as well, like body horror has long been in the shadows of, lurking in the corner of the video shop. But The Substance was something that had such an impact. So
I was genuinely shocked at how much that film gave no fucks about what it was doing in the denouement of Buckets of Blood, like it was brain dead or something.
Yeah, it's incredible. When I saw it, I was like, oh wow, it's going for it. This is great. This is proper body horror, and it utilizes like the abject so well. And I'm writing an article at the moment for a collection of essays on horror and talking a lot about The Substance. Because it utilizes all the stuff that we love about horror around kind of like the female gaze and the abject and body disgust and sense of identity through this kind of repulsion. And it became this hugely mainstream, amazing film. Maybe because it talks about aging and that's something we are all quite scared of.
Yeah. Demi Moore was brave in inverted commas with the way it was reported. Right, yeah. For being on a film like she's not been in a film before because she's a bit older than she was when we saw her last time. So you mentioned something about how horror shows us and allows us to process parts of ourselves that we may not otherwise acknowledge. What do you mean by that?
So when looking at that, it's looking at some of the kind of old school psychoanalytic thinking, bringing in some like Freudian stuff and Jungian archetypes, and really seeing that what we see played out on the screen is a representation of our internal processes a lot of the time. So we recognize certain figures, certain tropes, certain behaviors or patterns that play out throughout horror. And we can see how it then perhaps represents our kind of psychosexual development or our battle between our shadow self and our conscious self. So for a really kind of one example that you could look at is like the hero's journey that plays out throughout a lot of horror. So you get that, you could look at it like Ash and Evil Dead, right? So you get this slightly naive character who has to kind of fight a load of challenges and take on personal demons, literally, and tests and kind of come through it a changed character ready to go into the next battle, which would be the sort of sequels. And that would be the hero's journey narrative. And what that represents is our own battle between our conscious mind and our shadow self that we all have to go through to kind of develop through into our kind of whole self. And so because it's really difficult to do within us sometimes because we don't always want to look at our shadow self, we don't always recognize what's happening psychologically, we put it on a screen and we allow ourselves some resolve through watching it all kind of play out. Much like, in the uncanny, you would get, the stuff that we put down and don't want to look at in our unconscious. Horror shows it to us. So it shows us the stuff that we don't want to look at. One I always use for that, an example is The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers. Is very much, it's the Oedipus complex. That is just the Oedipus complex on screen.
Is it really?
Right. So you've got a kind of older and younger figure who are battling it out for access to the light, which could be seen as the feminine, the knowledge, the power. And ultimately you have the two figures who are battle, there are spoilers in this, who are fighting it out. There is the kind of sexual element to the light that the older figure gets to enjoy that the younger doesn't. The younger one desires to have the closest to the light, so takes away the older father figure. And at the end ends up ultimately in a sort of castrated state. So it's the Oedipal myth, it's the Oedipus complex put onto a screen. We don't like to think of ourselves in Oedipal terms, you know? So what we do is we get to watch it on a screen instead and recognize our own internal processes without even realizing we're doing it. And that's the psychology behind why we are drawn to these kind of darker films. It allows us resolve around the darker, like in quotes, darker sides of the self.
So in that sense then, are we, I mean, you talk about the conscious self and the shadow self. I mean, are the two of us watching it at the same time, and are we denying one the privilege of watching it at times? Is that happening? Is a trigger happening like that?
They're all part of us, so we are witnessing and relating it in different ways, but at the same time. So our shadow self is the part of us that we don't want to look at. It's our lust, our greed, it's our rage. It's multiple different things depending on how you look at the shadow.
Yeah.
And so we recognize our shadow on the screen, and we recognize the hero in that, well, that's who I should be in the world. That's acceptable. That's good. And then you kind of watch the battle play out, and you recognize how the different parts of us perhaps interact within us. So, and you can look at it in numerous different ways, looking at in the kind of final girl battle is a battle around kind of gender power and the masculine and the feminine within us and within the world. Or, we can find ways to understand what's happening around us and inside us through all these different stories. We always have, we use fairy stories, myth, and horror really works on that same kind of basis, that it represents these different parts of the self in various different ways, all playing out as they do within us.
I mean, as part of my own journey as a horror fan, being a horror fan as a kind of mid to late teenager was just a rite of passage. How visceral can it get? Can I disgust myself? Can we all be disgusted? Have you seen this? That kind of thing. And then in the early 90s, I read Men, Women and Chainsaws, Carolyn Glover's book, which was a real gateway. At first, I would say it ruined horror for me at first, because I had never thought of horror in those layers. It was just a visceral experience, like putting a thrash metal album or something, There was no nuance to it. And she invited me to go, there's a lot of nuance to this stuff you like.
Absolutely. And I love that book. It's so good for understanding so much of the processes. And it was exactly the same when I was a teenager. It was just, I wasn't really allowed to watch horror movies when I was younger. So they just naturally fascinated me anyway. And then it was about the artwork on the front of the box. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm going to watch the weirdest, grossest thing I can find. And just loved it and enjoyed it. And some of the films I saw then, like I always say, I first watched Candyman and I was like, oh, this is just like a boogeyman. He's got a hook and he's terrifying. And then as an adult, you watch it through the lens of cultural trauma and racial trauma. And so, I very much had the same journey, but therapy does the same, right? Because you go in. I think it's the same, right? Because what you do is you're like, these are just the things I do. This is just who I am. I respond on my body feelings. I respond on the way I see the world. I respond to the things I hear in my head. Right. And it's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
And then you go into therapy and you unpick it all and you get a different lens to look at it through. And you're like, actually, now I have this insight into the processes, into why I see it this way, into the fact that maybe this isn't what I thought it was. And for me and for many people that I know and have worked with, you get that point of like, I wish I didn't know this stuff. I was enjoying things before and now I'm kind of maybe ignorance was bliss. And particularly training to be a therapist, when you start really unpicking everything, you're like, oh, I don't know if I like this. Maybe I know too much. And then you realize actually the benefit of it. And it's like, now I kind of see things in this new way and it's good. And I think that the journey with horror and the journey with therapy have actually mirrored each other in that way. So ignorance is bliss, then it's a rocky road, and then there's a kind of zen. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, in the ideal world. You kind of have to explore it all and get curious and peel back layers, and you're like, oh, this hurts, I don't know if I like it. And then it's like, but now it feels, now I'm rebuilding and I'm understanding it and I'm using my new knowledge, and it feels good. And I think horror offers us that process, both on a big level and on a film by film level, right? You're like, oh, this is nice. Oh God, it's horrible. Oh wait, there's some form of something that I take from this now.
I remember the Polanski film Repulsion, and reading that it is a film that's often shown to therapists as a way to show what this condition looks like. You know, and is that a truism? Is that?
I was never shown it. I mean, look, honestly, anything that I was interested in that was considered darker was not approved of when I was training to be a therapist.
Okay.
So it was very much so. I don't know. Maybe it gets shown to therapists, and I think there's a lot of films that could be shown to therapists to help out. I mean, like you know, when you think of the experience of somehow where mental health can feel, possession would be such a good, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's plenty of films that could be utilized, but when I was learning, it was very much seen as the only time it was particularly mentioned was I got a placement in a bereavement agency, and my lecturer in front of everybody said, "Well, you'll be fine with death. You're a goth." I was like, "Well, I mean, yes and no. I like the aesthetics. I don't know if I, you know, feel super comfortable with my own mortality, but you know, I think the more and more I meet people that come to talks that are training to be therapists and find the movies that we watch really helpful for understanding how things feel. Because I think the other element I love about horror, and where I'm kind of looking at the sexuality side of things as well, is horror, because of its nature, because it challenges things and challenges norms and isn't afraid to look at things in a very different way.
Yeah.
It allows us to step into the experience of others in a way we might not always get. And it didn't always used to be like this, particularly as well as it's done now, because horror's always had a relationship to like otherness. So it's always been like the other is the monster, the other is the bad thing, the scary thing. But actually what horror can do is allow us to get a moment of what it might be like to be in that place or that position, and the monstrousness of how things can feel to somebody. So I actually think horror is really helpful in empathy as well, you know, to kind of experience what it might be like to be a woman that goes through this experience, or to be a person of color who finds themselves in this environment, or to be somebody who's experiencing psychosis. So I think it allows you momentarily to step into something and gain an empathy of how terrifying it could feel.
Yeah, because going back to Carolyn Glover's book, I think, you know, what was that, 92, 91 when it come out? Like you think how much the landscape has changed now, the kind of tropes that she was addressing, and she was reversing the usual critique, because she got in a lot of hot water, I think, about the way she talks about Spit on Your Grave being maybe a feminist movie, and people were like going, "Are you crazy? Are you crazy? This is," and it's like, no, I'm reading it this way, and this is why it is.
Yeah.
But I think now, when we 30 plus years on, if we see those things, it's as horrifying to see the trope now as
right.
Which is a weird sign. I don't know if it's a weird sign of progress. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is a sign of progress. I think we're always going to look at films differently based on our lens of where we are in life and where we are in time. Yeah, I mean, I Spit on Your Grave is such an that is a film I find really hard to watch, actually. Still, rewatched it recently. I've watched it a few times. I watched it by accident. Somebody turned up with it on a date, not knowing what it was.
Blimey, O'Reilly.
Don't recommend that as a date movie. But yeah, no, it was watched again. It's still an uncomfortable watch, but in a way I can kind of see it's like, okay, we look back and it makes you feel horrible, and we should feel horrible when we watch something like that happen, right? You know, these are things that are meant to make us feel uncomfortable and see how awful they are. Again, like, to kind of tie it in with the therapy thing, you know, there's often an idea, you know, like, oh, do you get comfortable hearing all the trauma and all the things that people experience? It's like, no, because I'm meant to feel uncomfortable when I hear about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we're meant to have these responses. So I think horror is really interesting in that we do have a visceral response to it, but I think we should. And then it's like, okay, well, it offers this lens to actually be like, okay, well, if I'm seeing this and I'm feeling this way, it's telling me something about the way the world is.
Yeah.
And just there's so many layers to it. I don't know if there's ever one way to watch a film either.
No, that's true. That's true. There's so many times when I've hated something, and the more I thought about it, the more it's compelled me to have to watch it again, because there's something that's scratching the back of my head that I can't shake.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's been quite a few films like that with me, or I've watched it and been like, I don't know if I like it. And they've gone back. And then, and now I probably talk about it a lot.
This is something that came up from research I've been doing for some work. I'm looking for a character, and it's the idea of through trauma, the body to keep score. This expression that I come across.
Yeah.
I don't know if is that a kind of used expression? Is it?
It is. It's from Bessel van der Kolk. The body keeps the score.
Okay, yeah.
He's a very huge figure in trauma work, and wrote the book that pretty much every therapist gets given at some point in anyone working through trauma. Yeah. Now,
obviously, the elements of that are extreme. I mean, I think it's things like incest and all kinds, isn't it? Is what he kind of looked at. But do you think there's elements of that where we could expose ourselves in just horror films and stuff and become incite trauma in watching a horror film? Is that something that you? I know the moral panic would say yes all the time, but I just wonder if it exists in that sense. You could shock yourself just through watching a film because it taps into you.
I think if it taps in too close, because, the good thing about watching something on a screen in a horror movie is knowing it's not real. So it does allow us to gaze at things and look at things that would feel too uncomfortable to look at them if they weren't behind a screen.
Yeah.
But if something's too close, it can absolutely feel uncomfortable at best. It can kind of tap into a trauma. I've had it. I watched a film that really did connect with trauma that I'd quite recently been through, and I hadn't expected it to do so. So I have relational trauma. I watched when the new Invisible Man came out. I watched that and it was too close to the bone.
Oh, really?
And I had to, it finished. I was like, no, I feel like I could feel my spine shaking, it was like, no.
Yeah.
So it can, I'm not kind of saying that it's always going to be helpful, but at the same time, I then went back and rewatched that film a bit later, and it allowed me a sort of relief through revisiting it. So I think it's always being careful with anything that utilizes difficult things, that uses trauma, that uses fear, that uses the nervous system in a particular way, because it has to activate our nervous system on some level for it to create that fright. So, so it could always tap into something that's a bit too difficult, but at the same time, it is a safe way to explore it. It's bringing in a slightly interesting way of looking at it, but one of the other fields that I look at a lot, because I work in gender, sexuality and relationship kind of therapy, as well as trauma. And sometimes looking at the sort of similarities within the kink world and the horror world, that you're playing with certain things. So you're playing with certain ideas, fantasy, taboo, power, things that, but you're playing at it, you're playing with it from a level where actually at the core level, everyone's equal, everything's safe, everything's fine.
So the screen is the tacit agreement that we're all playing a role in this.
Yes. And so, we're allowed to then watch and play with and experience things and get close to things in this way where it's like, but it's not real. It's okay. And so in that way, actually, it can help us with traumas in some way. It might get too close in some ways. And it's just being careful how we kind of use it and enjoy it as well. I don't want to suck the fun out, but yeah.
Of course. Well, thinking of the fun side of it, you obviously taking this out on the road and talking to people, which is obviously very different than from obviously talking to someone one-on-one and being a therapist. So what's been your favourite revelation that in the post Q&A with the audience? What has people revealed to you that you've really been sort of either sort of surprised or just overjoyed to hear somebody sort of make that connection, or even a discovery you've made through this process for yourself?
I think what probably one of the things that stood out to me that always comes when I think of oh wow, was, being careful about what people say, but I guess it's in a public forum. I talk about Midsummer in the talk, and I talk about the fact that the around the levels of manipulation and all the different elements that are playing out in it. And so that often comes up in the Q&A, and people always have an interpretation of it. And they're like, oh, what do you think of the ending? Or my interpretation was this. And everyone's kind of interested. And someone told me that they knew a Scandinavian couple who just thought it was hilarious, like the whole film. So that bit, for some reason, I was like, wow. So I was like, that's really interesting. And it's like, they were just like, oh, this is great. Like, this is hilarious. And I don't think that's every Scandinavian person.
No, of course. Yeah.
But I was like, wow, that's so fascinating. And I think they thought it was like British people's perception of Scandinavians' relationship to nudity. So that it was like, we're going, oh gosh, this isn't okay. And that actually it's so that it was kind of playing out. And I just thought it was fascinating. But I think what I enjoy the most about it is a lot of people come along and they're like, I thought I was weird, or I've been told I was weird my whole life because I love this genre, or because I'm going through difficult things and I find comfort in these movies that are gory or scary, and it's so nice to know I'm not alone. And I think that's my favorite thing, is the amount of people that are turning up to these talks and leaving feeling less alone. And not necessarily because of hopefully partly because of what I'm saying, but because of the other people in the room as well.
Absolutely.
It's like this mass experience. I think that brings me the most joy. I think that's the bit I like the most, because I feel that too.
Well, I mean, and I think that's really important. It's certainly in this day and age of where we're connected less in the real world, where you can make that connection, and even if people go away and never come to another event till the next one comes round, the fact that I know my first ever time going to Fright Fest was like, oh my God, they're all the same. Where did this happen? When did it,
Right.
And that idea you're not on your own is a really good feeling.
Absolutely. I always joke, I love going to horror conventions, and there are people dressed up as the most grotesque characters, and they're in the toilets fixing make like, hey, you all right, you having a good day? And it's like this lovely connecting moment of everybody all together. Some of them walk around carrying weapons and masks, and it's like, but we're all in this. We love it. We share this.
Indeed. Well, look, I would love to keep talking about this, but we have to get into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Right then. The rules are simple. I'm talking to other people now, not just yourself. For those that haven't heard it before, Casey's given me 3 films, which we'll do in the order she gave them me. And every time we hear this sound, that's the sound of 5 minutes being up. And then we move on to the next film. Does that sound fair?
Perfect. Sounds good.
We start with the formative years of 20th century cinema. And I think this might be the first silent movie that I've got to talk about on the podcast, on this series anyway. I'm talking about 1922's Nosferatu, directed by F.W. Murnau, a director influenced by Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Shakespeare and Ibsen, plays that he saw when he was 12.
Amazing. Of course.
So tell me, actually, just one fun fact, given what we were talking about Midsummer, Nosferatu was banned in Sweden until 1972.
As it should be, because it scares the hell out of me, and that's why I want to talk about it. Actually, it's beautiful. But
so tell me, yes, why is this film so memorable for you, and what impact does it have on you?
This film, more than any, to me, represents fear. It's an incredible film. It has haunted me through most of my life. And whenever you speak to people who love horror movies or kind of spooky stuff, and they often have that one thing that scared them so much they got obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. Mine is Nosferatu. Okay. And it is this particular version of Nosferatu. And I didn't even see the film when I was a kid. My dad was a big fan of Queen, and he had the Boxatrix VHS, which had the music video by David Bowie and Queen, Under Pressure, and Nosferatu is in that video. So it's all clips of black and white film and different things put together. And one of them is Nosferatu. And that image of Nosferatu I saw as a kid scared me so much. I used to lie awake at night and picture his shadow looming over me. So it's where he kind of appears in the doorway and then kind of looms over Hutter. And I don't know why I did the shadow move. No one can see that. But he kind of looms over with the kind of shadowy figure. And that kept me awake night after night after night. You know, when you're a kid, you can't tell how long times are, but it felt like forever. I was terrified of him. I didn't really even know he was a vampire. And then as I got older, I sort of realized it was from this film Nosferatu and who this figure was.
So just literally a scary image that clips up in a music video had you on a hook.
Yeah. Had me absolutely terrified.
Amazing.
I'm so scared. I got absolutely fascinated by it. And then figured out it was from this film Nosferatu. Then that film, like Shadow of a Vampire, came out. So I became like fascinated with that. And the whole, like the mythology that goes around it. That Max Schreck was actually a vampire, and you know all the kind of stories that are linked into this film. And then when I went to uni and did film, I ended up in a module of, I think they called it German proto horror, but it was a lot of that expressionist kind of darker cinema. And Nosferatu, of course, was a huge part of that. And I just think the imagery of it, the way those films were made, the fact that they're silent, the score, everything about it just looks like fear to me. You know, like the way they're all a bit distorted and it's angular and the black and white and the contrast and the way he moves. It's so beautiful and so terrifying. And then when it like would go to the cinema to see it with like live musicians or to go and like just follow this film around really kind of and it's still like going because I knew it would scare me at the same time that I find it beautiful. And not that many films scare me. Some unnerve me.
Yeah.
Because they've hit on a trauma thing. But that image of Nosferatu still gets me. And the more you learn about it, it ties into sexuality at the time and kind of Murnau being a gay man at that point and how you can kind of read into some stuff around sexuality there. And there's some problematic stuff to it as well around you know, kind of again the other, but you know, I just find it such a fascinating piece of cinema, and it's really, I feel like always it's just followed me around.
Can I ask you then, in terms of that introduction being just an image, and then when do you see the film then?
So I didn't see the film until I was in my late teens because I was too scared to watch it.
Okay,
because it gets to the point. Even so, I'd seen the image, it scared me. My poor parents, like, they must have felt so bad, but they just had this like music video on it, and I was like so terrified. It stayed with me. And then like being at a restaurant somewhere in America with my parents, and they had a big screen with music videos on, and it came on again, and being like, oh God, and like I just couldn't handle seeing it again. So it wasn't until I got into my later teens that I actually was like, I need to watch this film. I actually need to sit and watch it now and figure out what it is.
Perfect timing. Mine was I guess the way Friday the 13th, the original, ends. I saw it when I was 11, and I thought I was being Big Joe Potatoes watching the film, and I'd cope with everything up until and Jason coming out on the boat at the end. That ruined me when I was 11. Ruined me. And yet I still wanted to watch more horror films. It's like, it's the weird contradiction.
Innit? It's that one thing that gets you. But yeah, mine wasn't even the film.
That's brilliant, though. No, it's funny because I've had people that come on who've seen, like one person came on and they picked Psycho, and they were watching it from a stair, looking into the living room, got caught by the parents, and it was 15 years before they saw the rest of the movie. For Katie's second choice, we're going to jump into the 1980s for a bona fide blockbuster that I saw on my 13th birthday, and we pretended to cross streams with the inflatable Father Christmas that used to be on Manchester Town Hall around Christmas time. Directed by Ivan Reitman and co-written by the co-stars Dan Aykroyd and Howard Ramis. Ghostbusters tells the story of foreign paranormal investigators battling mischievous ghouls in New York and a possessed Sigourney Weaver while desperately trying not to cross the streams, which obviously becomes an important story point. Almost none of the scenes that were filmed as scripted, most were ad-libbed, and Harold Ramis only intended to write the film, but he decided he was the right person to play the Spengler character in the end. But tell me, Katie, why does this film have such an impact on you, and what is so memorable about it?
So, Nosferatu represented pure fear. To me, Ghostbusters represents pure joy. I kind of picked it for the feeling that it gives me. It is a film that I saw when I was a kid. So it came out just before I was born, and then it would just always seem to be around. And it was just, I was absolutely fascinated by it. Because the thing is, I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies, but my parents allowed me to watch like slightly spooky stuff. And I always loved that slightly spooky stuff. And this, to me, was just perfection. And it's a film now that I will still watch it over and over and over again. You know, it's one of those that like you sat there and it's probably going to be on ITV2 at some point, and I will still watch it from start to end. I just love, I hear the noise of like the car and I'm just like the siren that they have. And I'm like, oh my God, like my heart fills with light. The music, I still listen to the theme song quite a bit. And
I lived through that being in the charts.
Right. You know, it's incredible. And I'll be out and about, like, and it'll come on somewhere because the places that I go. So, like, my friend has a vampire pizza bar in Camden, and if I go there and it's got all that kind of music on and Ghostbusters come on, I'm like, oh! Like, it just fills me with so much joy. And it also reminds me of going to Universal Studios when I was a kid.
Okay.
And at that time, when I went to Universal Studios, they had a Ghostbusters show. And
amazing.
The Ghostbusters would walk around, and I've got pictures of me at like 7 meeting the Ghostbusters, you know, not the real ones, obviously, but you know, real to and you'd meet the Ghostbusters and Slimer, and it just it kind of sums up that point of time of going to Universal Studios when I was a kid. Really got me hooked into so much of the stuff that I still love now. So like Ghostbusters, Universal Monsters, Beetlejuice, and so I tie in Ghostbusters, all of that, of what got me to the stuff that I love now. As much as I love the really scary, dark stuff, and sometimes I want to come out of a movie feeling emotionally changed by it, and feel like I've seen, you know, my inner workings play out on the screen. Sometimes I just want that pure, losing yourself into it, joy, colourful, playful kind of side of film. And to me, Ghostbusters is all of that. The characters are great. I still think it's funny. Like the characters are so flawed and brilliant. And it's essentially a possession movie, as you said, you know, but you know, whereas most possession movies are fairly brutal, and you can read into them around lots of stuff around body and gender and sexuality and power dynamics, and you know, the body is a battle site. In this, you can just put your mind aside and be like, yeah, Zool. You know, so you know, it just everything about it. Like even talking about it now, I'm like, I want to go downstairs and watch it again. Like I smile so much when I think I don't know what it is. I just love it. My dog's got a Ghostbusters outfit.
Go away.
She has. She would go to daycare. You probably didn't expect the talk to go this way.
No.
She used to go to daycare, and they had superheroes day, and I was like, well, everyone does the same superheroes. I'm like, Ghostbusters are superheroes in my mind. So she's got the pack and everything, like a little inflatable pack. She's got the costume. Yeah.
And did you like this? Did you like where it went with the future stuff, with the sequels and stuff? Did it capture for you what Ghostbusters is about?
Actually, they did. And when they first brought them back, I sobbed so much at the ghost. Like when you see the original Ghostbusters come back together and the ghost was bang, I sobbed so hard. Like it really got to me. I love them. I love Paul Rudd as well. So I think maybe that's a bit of it. But I really enjoyed the new ones too. And I think, you know, I don't think you'll ever capture 1 and 2. It's where the sequel is equally as great as the first one. Yeah. I don't know if they'll ever capture that. The new ones, I think, the new ones captured enough. I think they still gave me that feel. Maybe it's my attachment.
Indeed. Right then, we're on to your final choice. And we're going to be delving into the trash aesthetic of John Waters. After 1988's Hairspray was a huge success, studios were keen to finance his next movie, and Universal Pictures gave him $8 million to make the 1990 rock musical Cry Baby, starring Johnny Depp and Ricky Lake. Fun fact, and this did blow me mind. I always like this when I find out who else was up for the part. I don't know if you know this. Tom Cruise, Robert Downey Jr. and Jim Carrey were all considered for the role of Cry Baby. And And Depp used several role models in order to create his character, including Chet Baker, Elvis Presley, Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran, Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash. No surprises there, I don't think, in terms of what he did. And obviously he changed his TV pop idol kind of image overnight with this role. But tell me, why is this an important film for you and why so memorable?
So this, to me, was my introduction to John Waters.
Okay.
I had not seen other John Waters films before this one. It wasn't something that kind of entered my world living in the suburbs of Liverpool. Didn't know many John Waters fans. And the reason I was in my little teen rockabilly, psychobilly phase at the time. So I've still got some of the rockabilly tattoos, but I was in that kind of stage of life.
Yeah.
And this found the film and like the rockabilly aesthetic of it. And then I saw it and discovered John Waters, and I think it's really impacted the way that I see the world in many ways. I love John Waters' aesthetic. I love the kitsch, trash, but I love the fact that what he does is he makes the focus the outsider, and he really utilizes a lot of humor and camp aesthetic and kitsch to challenge normativity. You know, you see so much the way John Waters gets used in looking at, around kind of queer theory and around queer culture and fighting against normativity. And he does it in this way, which is so over the top and so kitsch and so just embracing of that way of seeing the world that I think it's absolutely incredible. You know, the bringing together of like beauty and repulsive, and they're the people you're like, oh, would I want to meet them out on the street? Kind of, yeah. It was kind of like introduction to divine. And
I think for me, John Waters was the first time I'd ever seen people's work, noticed people's work where it was unapologetically what you're describing. It was unapologetically so. Whereas
absolutely,
it was other stuff had always been like trying to ease its way in or make an excuse. He's like going, no, I'm here.
Absolutely. Like, this isn't Grease, this is like really trashy, and the characters are absolutely misfits. You've got Iggy Pop having a bath outside in a metal tub, and you've got, someone in an iron lung selling cigarettes, and you've got all, you've got all this like wild look at culture and taking Americana culture in this totally different lens, but doing it completely unapologetically and doing it in this real way of like, not in Crybaby, but in films like Polyester. You've got Divine, who is this, beautiful but bizarre looking drag queen playing the romantic lead without any notion of the fact that she's a drag queen. She's just the romantic lead.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've got Tracy Lords in Crybaby, who at the time was being hunted down by the FBI.
Yeah, I was getting ready for this. I was reading about how the rest of the cast were protecting her, but also telling her about their sort of falls from grace to make her feel better.
So many of the people that were actually in these films were actual outsiders, or they had these fascinating stories. So when she was like, they were turning up to try and take Tracy Lords, they were like, yeah, we've all been there. So they all had these wild life stories already. Like the whole group that he gets together, it is absolutely incredible, which reminds me of the old monster movies where James Whale would utilize actors who, they were often sort of gay or kind of, you meet them in the kind of clubs that they'd all go to for like authentic kind of living. So I think these are called pansy clubs, but it's not a term we use now.
Yeah.
But, and James Whale would utilize people in his films who were not necessarily accepted at the time, but they could be their authentic selves on screen. And John Waters does a very similar thing. He brings these people in who would be seen as outcasts, and he casts them in roles where they're just playing the role. Like Edith Massey is such a, strange character, but in the films, like, yep, she's just here. She's the friend. She's the, so absolutely love his way that he looks at people.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. No, it sort of had me thinking about what I enjoy about Waters' films a lot. Getting ready for this, it was, I do like that idea of it. He gives us a world and doesn't try and make allowances for whatever the real world is meant to be. But yet, I feel like I'm in a real world. I don't feel like I'm in a parade. I feel like I'm in a real world. Like I've just looked at, like Blue Velvet does, but it's
Yes.
that kind, there's a dream reality to any kind of film, but once you're 30 minutes in, then actually this is just normal. There's nothing sort of like, jazz hands, like, look, we're just being a bit wacky.
Absolutely. And through that, he sort of challenges normativity and normative structures and the way, and even things like racism, he really kind of challenges a lot through this wild aesthetic that he uses that is just so unique and beautiful.
Brilliant. Well, look, that brings us to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your life. I hope you enjoyed that. And it just gives me to say, thank you very much for giving your time on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I've loved talking about this stuff. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Do remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more movies that impacted your life. And if you want to, I'd love to know what your favourite movies are, what your fondest movie memories are. So please share your favourite movies that impacted your life on Twitter. Look for @LeightonRocks, and you can always leave me a review, 5-star preferably, and in your review tell us which 3 films impacted your life. Best ones get read out on the podcast.
Hello, I'm Friendship.
Hi, I'm Mealy, and we're the hosts of Getting Around to It, a podcast by creators for creators.
We talk about topics that content creators can relate to,
like algorithms, sponsorships, and parasocial relationships.
Plus, we'll give you that gentle nudge when you need to get it done.
Or a slightly less gentle nudge to just do it.
Tune in every other Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.